"I've turned around bigger than this," he said again for the 5th time that morning. His laugh echoed across the glass conference room like a fire alarm no one bothered to shut off. Noah Kessler had been in the building less than 48 hours and was already acting like he'd invented oxygen. He didn't sit, he sprawled, didn't talk, he performed. His business card had 6 words on it, but only one mattered to him: Vice President. I was 2 seats down, next to the legal pad I lived by and the cold coffee I never got to finish. He hadn't looked at me once since his introductory vision sync began. But I was already a problem for him, and he didn't even know it yet. "I want our next client pitch clean, streamlined, polished," he said, pointing vaguely at the whiteboard someone else had written on. "None of that legacy process junk. We're a modern firm now." Then he turned to me for the first time, smirked like he was about to explain fire to a caveman. "Kara, you're still using spreadsheets?" I smiled back, quietly, flatly, the kind of smile that says, "You're not worth the air I'd waste arguing." I didn't correct him, didn't mention the automated compliance monitoring I built from scratch, didn't mention that the clause library he just insulted was the only reason our biggest contract hadn't expired last quarter. That's the thing about men like Noah. They think silence means approval. Or worse, weakness. But silence isn't empty. It's loaded. Oh, and while you're listening, if you're one of the 97% who watch these stories but haven't subscribed, maybe tap that button and like the video. It keeps this channel going and helps us bring you more stories that hit like this one's about to. Back in the meeting, he had already started sketching circles on the whiteboard. "I want to lead this next session with the investors and clients. High floor, big table, big visuals. Let's sell simplicity." He underlined the word simplicity twice like it was a TED Talk. Then added, "Kara, you'll be there to, keep the timeline on track or whatever it is you do." The room chuckled. I didn't. I simply made a note in the margin of my pad. Client pitch. 11 all, conference R34. Then, underneath it, smaller. Document clause update, 3.1b, flagged. It's easy to underestimate the woman who never raises her voice. It's harder to recover when she's the one who wrote the rules you just broke. The email came through at 6:17 a.m. The subject line read, "Streamlining external comms." No greeting, no signature. Just a bullet point list from Noah, followed by a passive-aggressive smiley face I wanted to wipe off his keyboard with a hammer. "Going forward, let's simplify client communication. Kara will no longer be included on direct threads. Efficiency, redundancy." Just like that, I was erased from the loop I'd created. No call, no heads up, not even a fake polite, "Let's chat." Just a bullet point and an emoji. My junior analyst, Emma, had forwarded it to me with a shaky, "I think you were supposed to see this?" She wasn't. She'd been CC'd by mistake. I stared at the screen for a long second, long enough for my coffee to go cold again. Then I clicked over to the secure node of the compliance board, not the one our firm's execs used. The other one. The one housed within a structure they didn't even know existed. NQ Compliance Holdings, LLC. I built it 3 years ago after watching 2 senior execs almost tank our licensing with a cut-and-paste error. I'd taken the original clause language, encoded triggers around it, and mirrored it in a private shell, tied to a trust that reported only to me and a signature attorney in Arizona. Legal never asked questions because the filings were airtight. They didn't know who held the IP, just that it was protected and valid. I updated the red line in silence, marking the current exchange pool with a tag. Compromise risk, clause 3.1b. Downstream effect if not reviewed before next client touchpoint. Then I stared at Noah's calendar, already littered with client vision mapping sessions and ops reset roundtables. His version of stabilizing meant slapping buzzwords on deliverables he didn't understand and praying no one noticed when the licensing lapsed. The thing about government-backed contracts is they don't yell when something's wrong. They log. They timestamp. Then one day, your badge stops working. But Noah was too busy parading around like a frat bro with a clicker to realize the clause language he'd just skimmed past contained a line that required quarterly sign-off from the original architect, or the contract reverts to temporary status. Guess who that original architect was? Me. But I didn't speak up. I didn't call a meeting. I didn't argue for my seat back at the table. I just watched. And when Emma nervously asked, "Should I reply all and fix this?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "Let it run." By Thursday, Noah had claimed full credit for realigning our timeline in front of 2 client-side stakeholders. They nodded politely, said little. Then, Friday morning, a message came in. Subject: quick clarification, clause 3.1b. Still applicable? Noah replied in 7 minutes flat. Not sure what this is referring to. Checking with the team. He didn't CC anyone, because he didn't know who could answer. But I did. And somewhere, 3 floors below, a timestamp on a legal node flickered to yellow. The deck was supposed to be final, clean, sharp, investor-friendly. Noah had spent all week talking about visual simplicity like it was some divine truth. He even sent an email with the subject line, "PowerPoint is poetry," which I immediately filed under vomit. What he actually did was gut the core of our compliance framework because it didn't fit his flow. I didn't find out about the presentation change from him. I found out from a system alert I'd buried behind 3 layers of internal access. An auto tracker tied to the clause string 3.1b with a conditional trigger. Notify owner if phrase is removed from client-facing materials. At 9:42 a.m., that alert pinged. File name: Q4 cleared client view final Noah PPTX. Change log, clause 3.1b, language removed. Editor and Kessler. He'd deleted it. The clause that required quarterly sign-off. The clause that, by contract, validated our licensing structure in front of federal clients. To him, it was legal clutter. To the rest of us, it was the lock keeping our entire house from being condemned. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions. I just logged into the shadow registry through the node I'd set up 2 years ago under a split key authorization protocol tied to my legal trust. There it was, untouched, airtight, irrefutable. Full licensing packet, time-stamped approvals, original clause language. And at the bottom, in unmissable bold, authorized, Kara J. Blake. Role: architect and beneficiary entity, NQ Compliance Holdings, LLC Trust Registration, ID R178QZEL0945. I printed a clean copy, slipped it into my drawer, behind my backup drive, and the folder labeled Kessler Contingency. That same afternoon, at 2:06 p.m., Noah's assistant forwarded me a screenshot of an email from the client's legal team. Subject: quick clarification. Body: Hi Noah, just confirming, is clause 3.1b still valid per our original understanding? No context, no alarm, just the kind of message that makes people like Noah say dumb things. He did. I watched in real time, thanks to a silent auto-forward filter I'd embedded into his outbound legal correspondence. Another thing he never asked about. Another thing he never knew to delete. He typed, "What is this crap?" Then forwarded it to his assistant, tagging it with low priority. That phrase, low priority, triggered another alert. This time, I didn't just log it, I printed it. Because when a client's lead counsel asks about a contract clause, and your VP of strategy doesn't even know what it means, that's not just negligence, that's exposure. And exposure is leverage. I didn't need to be on the thread to answer their question. The real answer was already sitting in a locked drawer in my office, with my name at the bottom of it. Not Kara from Ops. Not the admin. Kara J. Blake, architect of the thing Noah was about to burn to the ground for aesthetics. Now I wasn't just watching, I was waiting. The calendar invite hit my inbox like a smoke alarm in a locked room. Subject: in-person working session. Client strategic review. Location: R34, Executive Conference Suite. Time: Friday, 10 a.m. That room was never used unless something was already smoldering. The view alone cost more than our entire HR budget, which meant the client, specifically their lead counsel, wasn't asking anymore. He was coming. Noah's response was immediate. He looped in the brand experience team to redesign the slide deck, scheduled a pre-brief with investors, and added me to the invite with a note that read, "Kara to attend for optics. Let's keep this clean, no derailments." I reread it twice. Optics. Derailments. As if I was a liability he needed to manage instead of the lock keeping his entire strategy from blowing open like a rusted safe. I clicked accept and said nothing. That night, I made one call. "Just observe," I told my attorney. "No interaction unless I signal." He didn't ask why. He knew my voice, calm, like a lake right before the storm splits the surface. I opened my file drawer, took out the licensing packet, laid it flat. Then I added something else to the folder, something I hadn't touched since the day I filed the provisional patent and transferred the ownership shell into the trust. My original business card. Not the company-issued one with the wrong title and the "thanks for being here" font. The real one. White, heavy stock, bare bones. Kara J. Blake, NQ Compliance. Holdings LLC architect and beneficiary. I took 3 more from the stack and slipped them between the folder tabs. Not because I was planning to use them, just in case. By morning, I'd reviewed every clause twice, built a fallback deck, color-coded 3 versions of the compliance language with citation markers. Noah wouldn't ask for any of it. But if someone else did, someone who actually read for a living, I'd be ready. At 9:38 a.m., I stood outside Conference R34, watching Noah pace in the hallway, practicing what I assume he thought was a firm handshake and a smug grin. "Let me lead," he said, not looking up. "Just keep your eyes open and your mouth shut unless someone calls on you." I nodded, smiled faintly. The kind of smile you give to a man rehearsing for a role he doesn't realize he never earned. Then I followed him in, 1 folder in hand, 3 cards tucked inside, and a legal network of ownership under my name that no one in that room yet understood. The room smelled like expensive wood polish and bad decisions. 18 floors up, with a skyline so clean it looked photoshopped, and glass walls that made you feel watched even when you were alone. The kind of space designed to make people nod, not question. The table was packed, client representatives on one side, their lead counsel seated dead center, flanked by a senior strategist and a note-taker who hadn't blinked once. Opposite them, two of our investor partners, bored and scrolling. Noah stood at the head like he was about to deliver the Sermon on the Mount with a laser pointer. The founder's chair was empty. Still, Noah launched the deck with the flourish of a magician who didn't know his rabbit was already dead in the hat. "Let's talk about efficiency," he beamed, clicking to the second slide. When I joined this firm, we were buried in legacy workflows, outdated compliance layering, no vertical clarity, just noise. So we simplified. He smiled like he'd just solved world hunger. The next slide loaded. It was my chart, my schema, the back-end interface I'd built with 3 whiteboards, a burned-out laptop, and legal dictionaries stacked knee-deep in my old apartment. "We streamlined the back-end," Noah said, gesturing broadly. "Rewrote the clause management protocol to reduce redundancies. Took initiative." I sat still, hands folded, face unreadable. But I caught it, a flicker in the lead counsel's brow. By slide 7, Noah was already rolling, claiming stability, claiming authorizations, claiming ownership of every system he hadn't even known existed 3 weeks ago. Then it happened. The client's counsel raised a hand, calm and surgical. "Apologies. Before we proceed, who approved the restructuring of Clause 3.1b? Noah blinked, paused just long enough to prove he didn't recognize the reference, then recovered with a chuckle, as if the question were too obvious to bother answering properly. "My team," he said, waving a hand. Obviously, I reviewed it personally. We stripped out unnecessary bottlenecks and legacy language, cleaned it up. Legal's been too bloated here. He didn't notice the note-taker pause for a beat before scribbling. The counsel didn't look away. "That clause governs eligibility on multi-year renewals. It isn't ornamental." Noah smiled wider, like a man who doesn't realize the building is on fire and thinks the heat is applause. "I mean, sure, but it's a compliance thing, right? That's why I've got my support staff here." He gestured vaguely in my direction, as if I were the ficus in the corner. "They handle the small stuff." Silence. The lead counsel leaned back slightly, measured. Noah leaned in, mistaking the pause for admiration. "Do you know who I am?" he said. And there it was, those 6 words. "Do you know who I am?" I didn't move, neither did the counsel. But on the far end of the table, one of the investors sat up straighter. The other locked eyes with the strategist, who quietly minimized his tablet. The only person in the room still smiling was Noah. He thought he was winning. He didn't see the storm already gathering behind the glass. Noah kept talking. Something about pipeline integrity and client retention protocols, as if the longer he spoke, the less likely it was anyone would notice the foundation he'd just kicked out from under the entire deal. But they noticed. The lead counsel didn't blink for a full 10 seconds after Noah's little "Do you know who I am?" performance. He didn't look amused. He looked curious. And not the good kind, the kind that usually ends in litigation. That's when I opened my folder. No rush, no drama, just one slow motion. I reached inside, slid out the thick ivory card, held it flat between 2 fingers like a poker chip at a table full of cheaters. Then I leaned slightly forward, meeting the counsel's gaze, and placed it in front of him. Center. Quiet. He glanced down. Read the name. Kara J. Blake, NQ Compliance Holdings, LLC architect and beneficiary. He blinked once, then leaned back like he'd just seen a ghost wearing a tailored suit. Across the table, one of the investor partners caught the motion and raised an eyebrow. The counsel picked up the card, turned it in his fingers, then, wordlessly, slid it to the investor beside him. Noah chuckled under his breath. "Let me guess," he said. "Vintage business card? Is this a throwback Thursday thing, or—" He stopped, because the investor had just pulled out his glasses, and the room shifted. Not loudly, not visibly, but something under the surface tilted, like the floor had moved a fraction of an inch off axis. The investor's face changed as he read the name, then again when he read the title. He didn't ask a single question. He just turned slowly toward Noah. That silence? It wasn't awkward. It was surgical. Noah's confidence cracked, just a hairline fracture. He licked his lips, adjusted his jacket, still smiling, but tighter now. Uneven. "Everything okay?" he asked, tone drifting into the octave where men realize they've stepped off a ledge and can't find the floor. The lead counsel didn't answer. Neither did the investor. Not yet. Then the investor set the card down on the table like a verdict and folded his hands. "Actually, son," he began, voice even and low. And just like that, the oxygen in the room dropped 10 degrees. Noah looked at the card, then at me. I didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't speak. I just watched the glass walls close in. "Do you know who she is?" The words hit the table like a gavel. Noah blinked fast, then laughed. Too hard, too sharp. She's the admin, right? Ops manager, handles timelines and spreadsheets and all the back-end coordination junk. He looked around, fishing for a laugh that never came. Silence. The investor didn't move, didn't blink, just kept his eyes on Noah like a surgeon watching a slow bleed. "She's the one I funded," the investor said, calm as a guillotine. "Before this company had walls, before you had a title to polish." Noah froze. You could feel it happen in real time, the unraveling, like someone pulled the thread of his ego and the whole suit started to fray. I sat still. No reaction, no smile, just breathing. The client's lead counsel laid the card gently beside his laptop, then tapped his screen. A file opened, one we all knew, but only a few understood. Contractual licensing framework, multi-year federal extension clause, subsection 3.1b. He projected it onto the screen behind Noah. There, in bold, NQ Compliance Holdings, LLC Registered Beneficiary, Kara J. Blake Authorization Level, Sole Architect. Noah turned just enough to read it, and that's when he realized what he was looking at wasn't a document. It was a lock, and he didn't have the key. The strategist on the client's side leaned forward, whispered something to the note-taker, who immediately pulled up a side-by-side with the stripped-down version Noah had sent. The contrast was stark. Their version had teeth. Noah's was all gums. The lead counsel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "This version is unenforceable," he said, tapping Noah's deck. "It omits the primary clause authorizing renewal eligibility. Without the architecture held by NQ Compliance Holdings, there is no legal basis for extension. The contract is void." Noah opened his mouth, then closed it. The first real silence he'd shown since walking into this company. And then, the click of a door, soft but definitive. Behind him, the founder stepped into the room. Evelyn Ridge. Silent, sharp, unannounced. Noah didn't notice, but everyone else did. The investors straightened in their chairs. The client's counsel glanced at her, then back at me, nodded once. Evelyn stood behind Noah, arms crossed, saying nothing. She didn't need to. The founder was in the room, and the man running his mouth hadn't even earned the right to know it. Noah finally looked back at me, eyes wild with confusion, lips parting to say something, anything. I held his gaze, unblinking, no gloating, no satisfaction. Just the same quiet stare I'd given him the first time he mocked my spreadsheet. The difference now? The entire room knew which one of us built the foundation they were standing on, and which one of us was already falling through it. Noah barely got 2 words out before the investor gave a tiny nod toward the door. One of the operations leads stepped forward, phone in hand. "Mr. Kessler, quick call for you, downstairs." He hesitated, glanced around. No one looked back. "Now?" he said. The op lead didn't blink. "Now." Noah stood, palms slightly raised, like he was still trying to figure out whether this was some weird client protocol or a test he could charm his way through. He gave a half laugh. "I'll be right back. Don't solve world peace without me." He turned to leave. The door clicked shut behind him. He never came back. The screen behind me still showed the clause registry, my name sitting bold at the bottom. Someone had finally muted the deck Noah was using. The client's counsel leaned back in his chair, satisfied. Investors were already murmuring next steps. A quiet hum filled the room, one of recalibration, not recovery, because no one was scrambling. They were adjusting. The damage had been isolated, the infection removed, and the original structure, the real structure, had revealed itself without a word of protest. Because it had never been lost, just ignored. I stood, collected my folder, closed it. Evelyn moved toward me slowly, the founder's gait, unhurried, purposeful. She didn't offer pleasantries, no hollow apology, just stood beside me as the room subtly began to revolve again, this time around a different center. "Thank you," she said, low and even, "for holding the line." That was all. That was enough. I nodded once. "Wouldn't have built it if I didn't plan to protect it." She gave the faintest smile, then turned to speak quietly with legal. The investor approached next. He looked older now than when I last saw him, when he wrote the first check that bought us 3 folding chairs and a whiteboard in a garage with no heat. "I should have known," he said, taking my hand. "You'd stay close." "I always do," I said. "I just stopped wearing the badge." He nodded, then walked off, already flipping open a notepad, barking a soft instruction to one of his partners. By noon, the internal notice hit inboxes across the company. Strategic Operations Division. Under Restructure Compliance. Oversight. Effective immediately, new lead. Appointed Cara J. Blake, Head of Compliance Architecture and Licensing Strategy. Not Ops. Not Admin. Not Support. Full name. Full role. No more LLC shells. No more signatures on someone else's stationery. This wasn't about spotlight. Never had been. It was about ensuring no one could ever erase me from my own creation again. By the time I returned to my desk, a dozen unopened Slack messages were blinking at me. HR requests, access clearances, quiet congratulations from people who'd never once looked me in the eye in meetings. I didn't answer them. I opened a new folder, labeled it Control Pathway Reset. Then I deleted every copy of my old business card from the server. From now on, they wouldn't need a card to know who I was. They'd have to ask permission. The glass still had fingerprints from the last round of execs who thought they ran the place. I stepped into the boardroom, quiet now, hollow in the way only power can be when it changes hands. The sun poured in through the west-facing wall, catching the new lettering etched into the glass like it had always been there. J. Blake Compliance and Strategy Center. Not a division, not a corner office, a center. The whiteboard hadn't been touched since the fallout. It still held the fraying remains of Noah's red marker flowchart and a half-erased clause header, barely legible. 3.1b. Renewal. Architect sign-off required. I stood in front of it for a second. Not nostalgic, just aware. The way you glance at old scaffolding before tearing it down for steel. I picked up a marker, the good kind, not the dried-out ones they left for junior staff. One stroke at a time, I wiped the chaos clean. Then I rewrote the clause. Tighter, clearer, bulletproof. No signature required. Just one directive. Validated through J. Blake Registry, perpetual control path. I capped the marker and stepped back. Behind me, the door opened gently. A junior analyst, wide-eyed, unsure, hovered in the doorway, tablet in hand. You're needed in Studio 4, she said. The founder wants to loop you in on expansion. I nodded, picked up my folder, the same one I'd carried into R34. Only now it wasn't a shield, it was a blueprint. Coming, I said. She waited for me to step out first, and as I passed through the glass threshold, past the plaque, past the room where I'd once been invisible, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. They never knew what kept the lights on. Now they ask before flipping a switch.